The sky hung low over Skullridge Hollow, a forgotten town tucked deep in the heart of Kentucky. Every first Sunday of the month, the sleepy streets came alive with the local flea market. White tents lined Main Street like pop-up castles, and the air was thick with the smell of kettle corn, fried dough, and warm apple cider. Beltrazila Mudflap, a 7-year-old with scuffed sneakers and untamed hair, walked beside her father, Zorgabob Flintstone, gripping 2 wrinkled dollar bills in her tiny fist. She didn't know what she was looking for, only that she'd know it when she saw it. Near the end of the market, past the homemade soaps and birdhouses, stood a simple table with a single pet carrier on top. Inside was a large German shepherd with intelligent eyes and a limp. He sat still, dignified, his right paw folded awkwardly under him. A handwritten name tag taped to the crate read, Nandog. Behind the table stood Grizzledaffy Coldpepper, an older woman with a weathered face and a soft smile. "Found him limping near the train tracks last week," she explained. "Good dog. Just, no one wants the broken ones." Beltrazila didn't say a word. She knelt in front of the crate, eyes locked with Nandog's, as if the two understood each other in a language older than words. Slowly, she placed her crumpled $2 on top of the carrier. Zorgabob raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He knelt beside her, unlatched the crate, and helped the dog out gently. Nandog limped forward, pausing just long enough to rest his chin against Beltrazila's hand. A bond had been formed, silent and unshakable. Back home, their modest farmhouse sat surrounded by cornfields and quiet. Beltrazila insisted on bathing Nandog in the backyard. Zorgabob, still unsure about this whole thing, agreed. As they soaked the dog's thick fur, something caught Beltrazila's attention near the base of his neck. A strange lump tangled beneath the hair. She reached in and pulled gently. What emerged was a tightly wrapped bundle, plastic and tape sealing it like a secret. Zorgabob froze. He took the package with both hands, his face turning pale. It was too familiar, the shape, the material. It was the kind of thing he hadn't seen since his years in private security. "This shouldn't be here," he muttered. He glanced down at Nandog, whose eyes now seemed far too knowing. The air turned still. Zorgabob looked from the bundle to the dog, then to his daughter, who was still smiling innocently. Somewhere in that crate, along the broken paw and the wounded pride, Nandog had carried something. Something someone wanted hidden. And just like that, the quiet life they knew was over. The kitchen table creaked under Zorgabob's elbows as he unwrapped the plastic bundle. His hands steady but his breath shallow. Inside was a small black flash drive, no markings, no label, just cold, dense silence. He hadn't touched something like this since his final year with Skullridge Private Security, before everything fell apart. Back then, flash drives didn't just carry files, they carried leverage, threats, and lives. Beltrazila, oblivious to the weight of what her father held, was sitting cross-legged on the floor feeding Nandog bits of boiled chicken. The dog, though still favoring his bad paw, seemed stronger now, more alert. Every so often, his ears would twitch as if picking up sounds no one else could hear. Zorgabob caught the dog watching him. Not with fear, but with expectation, like he was waiting for something to happen. Something Zorgabob had forgotten. He took the drive into his study, a small room cluttered with old radios, hunting gear, and yellowed maps of the Appalachian corridor. The last time he opened a suspicious flash drive, 2 of his colleagues ended up in the hospital. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. He plugged it into his dusty laptop and waited. A single folder appeared, titled Cold Trace 17. Inside were encrypted files, audio recordings, and a video grainy timestamped from 5 years ago in Afghanistan. The footage was brief but chilling. A military convoy ambushed in the desert. Explosions, screaming, and then a dog, a German shepherd, identical to Nandog, pulling a wounded soldier out of the line of fire. The camera zoomed in, just long enough to catch the ID tag around the dog's neck. NDG-17. Nandog wasn't just a stray. He was military, trained, witness to something classified and possibly still dangerous. Zorgabob leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. If this dog had been part of a Black Ops unit, someone somewhere was missing him or hunting him. He closed the laptop and locked the flash drive in his old gun safe. When he stepped back into the kitchen, Beltrazila looked up and smiled. "He likes me," she said, hugging Nandog's thick neck. The dog closed his eyes, calm for now. Zorgabob forced a smile, but his mind was already racing. That night, after Beltrazila went to bed, Nandog stood by the front door, ears up, muscles tense. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. But he stayed there, unmoving, watching the empty road as if he sensed something coming. Zorgabob turned off the porch light, his instincts burning like fire in his gut. He knew that silence. He knew that stillness. Someone out there was watching, and they weren't coming to take back a dog. The next morning broke with a stillness that felt unnatural. Even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. Zorgabob stood on the front porch sipping bitter coffee from his chipped, world's okayest dad mug. His eyes fixed on the long dirt road that led into Skullridge Hollow. Something had shifted in the air, like pressure before a storm. Behind him, Nandog paced along the windows, his body alert, ears twitching every few seconds. The sound of tires crunching gravel cut through the silence. A red pickup truck, faded and rust-eaten, crawled down the road and parked just beyond the front gate. Zorgabob's stomach tightened. The engine idled for a moment before shutting off. The door opened, and a heavy-set man stepped out. He wore dark sunglasses, a tan duster coat, and boots far too clean for rural Kentucky. Zorgabob didn't need to see his face to know who it was. Ricasoro Grimgut. They hadn't spoken in over 8 years, not since the Kabul fallout. Ricasoro was a former handler, the kind of man who left wreckage in his wake but always walked away clean. He sauntered up the gravel path like a salesman, hands in his coat pockets, a crooked smile under his graying mustache. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Still living in the woods like a ghost, huh?" Zorgabob stepped off the porch. "What do you want?" he asked, voice low. Ricasoro tilted his head. "You found something, didn't you? Or someone?" His eyes drifted toward the side of the house, where Nandog now stood motionless behind the screen door. For a moment, the former handler's smile faded. "You have no idea what you've got there, do you?" Inside the house, Beltrazila was drawing pictures of Nandog with crayons on the kitchen floor, unaware of the man outside. Zorgabob took a step closer to Ricasoro. "He was dumped at a flea market like trash," he growled. "Now he's mine. That's the end of it." But Ricasoro's voice dropped. "It's never the end of it, Flintstone. That dog was involved in something you were never cleared to know about. Cold Trace wasn't just a mission. It was a cover. And someone out there doesn't want that file you found making its way back to the light." Without waiting for permission, Ricasoro turned and walked back to his truck. "You should have buried that drive," he called over his shoulder. "Now you've put a target on your back. And your girls." The truck rumbled to life and disappeared down the road, leaving only dust and 1,000 unanswered questions. Zorgabob stood frozen, watching the dust settle. Behind him, Nandog let out a single low growl, not out of fear, but recognition. The kitchen lights flickered as dusk fell over Skullridge Hollow, painting the house in a warm but uneasy glow. Zorgabob sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the locked gun safe in the corner of the room. Inside it was the flash drive, that damn drive, and his old SIG Sauer pistol, untouched for nearly a decade. His hands trembled as he reached for the safe, not from fear, but from the weight of old instincts returning to life. In the living room, Beltrazila giggled as Nandog playfully nudged her with his snout, the limp barely slowing him anymore. She had no idea what the presence of that dog had awakened, in her father, in the world around them. Zorgabob watched from the doorway, his chest heavy. This wasn't just a loyal animal. Nandog had been trained, molded, sent into the fires of war and brought back scarred. And now, somehow, he had ended up here, like a message left on his doorstep. That night, Zorgabob didn't sleep. He sat by the window with the pistol on his lap, eyes scanning the tree line. Around 2 a.m. he saw it, a flash of light, far off near the woods. A red glint, like a laser sight or a scoped lens catching moonlight. He stood, adrenaline kicking in, and moved quietly down the hallway toward Beltrazila's room. Nandog followed without being called, tail down, eyes sharp. She was asleep, arms wrapped around a stuffed squirrel named Porky. Zorgabob leaned against the doorframe, swallowing hard. For years he had kept this house as their sanctuary, away from war, from politics, from ghosts. But the past had come crashing through the door, dragging danger behind it. By morning, he had made up his mind. They couldn't stay in Skullridge Hollow. He packed essentials, clothes, cash, canned food, and the gun. He gently woke Beltrazila, telling her they were going on an adventure. She didn't ask questions. She just grabbed Porky and Nandog's leash. Before leaving, Zorgabob burned the flash drive to a disk and hid it under a loose floorboard beneath the couch. If anything happened, someone had to find the truth. As they pulled out of the gravel driveway in his old tan SUV, he looked one last time at the place that had once felt safe. It didn't anymore. Several miles down the road, as they passed through the neighboring town of Brimstone Fork, Nandog suddenly tensed. His ears perked. His body leaned forward. Zorgabob glanced in the rearview mirror. A black SUV had just turned onto the same road, no plates. They were being followed. The black SUV kept its distance, never too close, never too far. But Zorgabob knew the pattern. It was a tail, trained and careful. The kind you don't notice unless you've been hunted before. He pressed harder on the gas, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Nandog sat upright in the back seat, head low, growling in intervals too soft for Beltrazila to hear. Beltrazila, still clutching her stuffed squirrel, looked up at her father with sleepy curiosity. "Are we playing spy games now?" she asked. Zorgabob managed a tired smile. "Something like that, sweetheart." But inside, his mind was racing. Ricasoro wasn't bluffing. Someone really was after the dog. Or the file. Or both. And now his daughter was in the crosshairs. He made a sharp turn off the highway and into a forgotten service road surrounded by thick woods. The SUV didn't follow. Not immediately. Zorgabob turned off his headlights and drove a mile into the forest before cutting the engine. The air was thick with silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. He reached back and unbuckled Nandog's harness. "We walk from here," he whispered. Beltrazila blinked but didn't protest. They hiked through dense underbrush for nearly an hour until they reached an old hunting cabin Zorgabob used to visit during training years ago. It hadn't been touched in ages. The wood was cracked, and ivy curled through the broken windows. But it would do. Inside, he checked for supplies. Dusty water bottles, old canned beans, and most importantly, a ham radio. Zorgabob powered it on and adjusted the frequency until he heard static turn into a faint voice. "Skullridge Dispatch, this is Grimgut requesting update." Zorgabob's heart sank. Ricasoro wasn't just a ghost from the past, he was active, probably contracted, possibly compromised. And now he had access to local communication lines. That night, Nandog refused to sleep. He sat at the cabin's single window, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. 3 a.m. he growled, louder this time. Zorgabob was already awake, gun in hand, boots laced. Beltrazila still slept on the dusty cot, oblivious to the world unraveling around her. From the shadows outside, a figure moved. Slow, controlled. A glint of metal. A rifle. Zorgabob ducked and rolled behind the table, heart pounding. Nandog barked once, sharp and direct, and launched through the broken door like a missile. A scream tore through the silence, followed by a gunshot. Zorgabob rushed out with his weapon raised. In the dirt, a man lay clutching his leg. Nandog circled him like a ghost from war. And then the man whispered, "You're not supposed to be alive. Not after Cold Trace." The man on the ground groaned, blood seeping through his pants just below the knee. Zorgabob stood over him with his pistol drawn, Nandog still circling like a trained sentinel. Beltrazila slept inside the cabin, blissfully unaware of the confrontation taking place just steps away. "Who sent you?" Zorgabob growled, voice low and lethal. The man coughed and spat in the dirt. I was supposed to extract the dog, the man rasped. That's it. Quick job. You weren't even supposed to be here, Flintstone. No one thought you were still alive. That name again, Flintstone, not just a family name, but a ghost from a classified world long buried. Zorgabob narrowed his eyes. You knew about Cold Trace? The man hesitated. Then he nodded slowly. It wasn't just a project. It was a list of people, targets. Nandog was trained for retrieval and termination. But something went wrong on the last mission. He saw something. Remembered too much. Zorgabob felt the words stab into his chest like ice. You're saying the dog has memory? He asked. Tactical memory, the man answered. Smells, faces, locations. He's more than just a dog, Flintstone. He's a damn vault. Zorgabob stepped back, eyes flicking to Nandog, whose gaze remained locked on the stranger. Could it be true? Could this dog be carrying within him the mental map to an entire Black Ops operation gone wrong? Beltrazila had called him smart, gentle, loyal, but maybe she had sensed something even deeper, something encoded in instinct, something once programmed and now awakening. The man coughed again. You have no idea who's coming for that animal. Ricosoro was just cleanup. The real team, they don't knock. Zorgabob didn't wait for more. He tied the man's hands with nylon cord and dragged him into the shed behind the cabin, locking the door from outside. Then he returned to Beltrazila, who had just woken up, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, why is Nandog barking at the woods again? She asked softly. He knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. Because he knows more than we do, honey, he whispered. Then, standing up, he looked at the map on the cabin wall. One location circled in red. Mudhorn Pass. A cold, desolate stretch near the state border. It had been marked on the drive before he destroyed it. A place tied to Cold Trace. To the past. Maybe even to answers. Zorgabob turned to Nandog. We're going to finish what they started, he said. The dog didn't move, he just stared at the map like he understood. Like he'd been waiting for this. The mountain roads twisted like coiled rope as Zorgabob's SUV climbed deeper into the Appalachians. Fog clung to the windshield, thick and stubborn, while the silence inside the vehicle was only broken by the rhythmic hum of the engine. Beltrazila sat in the back seat, coloring in her sketchbook with broken crayons. Nandog curled beside her like a silent bodyguard. Every few miles, he'd lift his head and stare out the window, not curious, but focused. Like he was navigating. Zorgabob hadn't spoken much since they left the cabin. His mind kept looping back to the name, Mudhorn Pass. It was listed in the Cold Trace 17 files, circled in red. A site used for covert field training and later, something else. Something darker. He hadn't been assigned there directly, but he'd heard whispers about chemical tests, neural conditioning, memory manipulation. Things not even mercenaries like to talk about. By noon, they reached a rusted metal gate half swallowed by pine trees and moss. A faded government sign read, Restricted Area U.S. Property, Keep Out, with bullet holes scattered like punctuation marks. Zorgabob stepped out, his boots crunching over gravel. He cut the lock with bolt cutters, then signaled for Beltrazila and Nandog to follow. The girl hesitated, clutching her stuffed squirrel tightly. Is this where the bad people were, Daddy? She asked. Zorgabob nodded, unable to lie. It's where they started, he said. Together, they crossed into the forgotten compound. A ghost town of broken structures, shattered windows, and silence that felt watched. Nandog's body stiffened. His head turned sharply to the left, ears locked on a crumbling barracks building. Without warning, he broke into a run, pulling Beltrazila forward until Zorgabob caught up and grabbed her hand. They followed Nandog through a shattered doorway into a long hallway, walls peeling, the floor damp with years of neglect. At the end was a metal door. Nandog scratched at it urgently, whining low. Zorgabob pushed it open with effort, revealing a dark chamber filled with old lab equipment, rusted cages, and something else. A chair, bolted to the ground with metal restraints on the arms. Next to it, a monitor, cracked, but still faintly glowing. Zorgabob stepped closer. On the wall above the chair was a list of dog IDs, including NDG-17. Nandogs, each marked deactivated, except his. His status read, missing. Below it, handwritten in faded ink, memory thread incomplete, subject unstable. Do not engage without control agent present. Suddenly, Beltrazila tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, he's shaking. Zorgabob turned. Nandog stood frozen, eyes locked on the chair. He wasn't growling. He was remembering. The air inside the chamber grew heavier with every breath. Zorgabob stepped cautiously toward Nandog, who stood trembling before the metal chair. His muscles were tense, eyes wide, almost vacant. Beltrazila gripped her father's hand tightly, sensing something wasn't right. Zorgabob knelt down beside the dog. It's okay, buddy, he whispered. But Nandog didn't respond. His breathing had shifted, deeper, mechanical, trained. Something in this place was triggering something ancient inside him. Suddenly, the flickering monitor emitted a high-pitched beep, followed by a burst of static. Then, distorted audio crackled through. Agent NDG-17. Begin protocol reinstatement. Command phrase Alpha 7 Romeo. The voice was unfamiliar, robotic. Nandog's head jerked violently toward the sound. His posture changed. His tail stiffened. His eyes, once soft and loyal, now locked onto Zorgabob with an intensity that was unfamiliar. Zorgabob stood up slowly, pulling Beltrazila behind him. No, this isn't happening, he muttered. He knew about control codes, fragments of speech embedded during training to trigger behavior. Assassins, scouts, even dogs. Especially dogs. Coltrace hadn't just trained canines for retrieval. They'd built weapons in fur. Nandog took a single step forward, low growl rumbling from his chest. Beltrazila, Zorgabob whispered. Go hide in the hallway. Now. She backed away, eyes wide with confusion, not fear. Daddy, he won't hurt us. He's our dog. But even she could see it. Nandog's breathing, his stance, his stillness. Zorgabob reached for the side of his belt, slowly drawing his pistol. This isn't you, he said firmly, locking eyes with the dog. I know you're still in there. The monitor sparked again. Another voice, this one real, not automated. A man's voice. Ricosoro Grimgut. If you're hearing this, Flintstone, you found the nest. Congratulations. But you just woke the last program still running. Nandog was never meant to survive Coltrace. If he's standing in front of you, something went wrong. And if you're still alive, it's because the dog is choosing you over the code. But don't count on that lasting. Zorgabob's grip tightened on the pistol, but he didn't raise it. Instead, he knelt again. You remember Afghanistan, don't you? That soldier. The one you dragged out of the fire. That was me. Nandog blinked. The growl faded. His ears lowered. Slowly, his body relaxed. The machine inside him lost its grip, and for a moment the dog came back. Then, from behind them, a sudden noise. A door slamming open. Boots. Voices. Not one. Not two. A team. Armed. Moving fast. Zorgabob turned toward the hallway, heart racing. They're here. The sound of boots echoed through the abandoned facility like war drums. Zorgabob didn't need to see them to know. The strike team was well-trained. Quick, coordinated, and not local. He pulled Beltrazila close, her tiny arms wrapping around his waist as she clutched her stuffed squirrel like a shield. Nandog stood beside them, his breathing shallow, eyes darting between the hallway and the broken monitor still crackling in the room behind them. Zorgabob crouched low and whispered, We go out the back. Crawl space under the lab. It leads to the ridge. Stay close to me, no matter what. Beltrazila nodded, lips pressed tight, too scared to speak. But Nandog didn't move. He stayed by the door, blocking it with his body, hackles raised. It wasn't fear. It was choice. A final stand. Before Zorgabob could pull him away, a flashbang exploded through the hallway door, throwing light and thunder into the room. Beltrazila screamed. Zorgabob shielded her, diving over her small frame. When the smoke cleared, the soldiers poured in. 4 of them, dressed in black, faces hidden behind tactical visors. One aimed directly at Nandog. "Stand down," one of them barked. "Give us the asset. Now." Zorgabob stood slowly, hands raised, shielding Beltrazila behind him. "He's not your asset. He's not a machine anymore. He chose us." The leader stepped forward. NDG-17 was never designed to choose. That's what makes him unstable. That's why we're here. He raised his rifle. Nandog growled low, eyes locked on the barrel of the gun. No hesitation, no fear, just instinct. The moment the man's finger tightened on the trigger, Nandog lunged. The room exploded into chaos. Shouting, shots, movement everywhere. Zorgabob grabbed Beltrazila and rolled behind a storage unit. Gunfire tore through the walls as metal screamed. 2 soldiers fell. Nandog didn't stop. He moved like a shadow, faster than any normal animal should. Zorgabob returned fire, precise and controlled, dropping a 3rd man with a shot to the shoulder. But the 4th had Beltrazila in his sights. "Drop it," he shouted. "Or the girl gets it." Zorgabob froze. Time slowed. Beltrazila's eyes were wide, tears running silently down her cheeks. Then, a blur of fur, muscle, and fury. Nandog slammed into the soldier, knocking the weapon aside just as the shot fired into the ceiling. They hit the ground hard. Nandog bit down, not to kill but to disable. When it was over, the soldier lay groaning, disarmed and defeated. The room was silent again, except for Nandog's heavy panting and the beeping of the cracked monitor still looping Ricosoro's last message. Zorgabob looked at the destruction around him. The lab, the blood, the soldiers. And then he looked at his daughter. "It ends now," he said. Smoke still lingered in the cold air as Zorgabob stood over the last fallen soldier. His hands trembled, not from adrenaline, but from the realization. There was no one else coming. That was the team, the cleanup squad, and they had failed. Beltrazila sat near the wall, arms wrapped around Nandog's neck, silent tears streaming down her face. The dog rested his head on her lap, bleeding from a deep gash on his shoulder, but alive. Zorgabob lowered his weapon and let out a breath that seemed to come from years of silence. He walked over to the monitor, now cracked beyond repair, the voice of Ricosoro having cut out minutes ago. The screen flickered one final time, displaying a message in blinking red letters. "Asset compromised, mission aborted." Then it died completely. He turned to Beltrazila. "We're going home," he said softly, but his voice betrayed something else. Uncertainty. Could they go back? Would life ever be normal again after this? Nandog lifted his head slightly at the word home, his ears twitching like he recognized it, like it meant something more now. As they exited the facility, the sunlight over Mudhorn Pass broke through the trees, soft and golden, casting long shadows over the broken building behind them. Nandog limped along beside them, every step painful, but every step forward. There was no more running, no more hiding. Zorgabob had made peace with something he never thought he'd face again, the man he used to be. They buried the flash drive in the woods before leaving. No government, no private agency, no handler would ever find it. The truth would rest there for now. Cold Trace had already taken too much. It wouldn't take anything else. A week later, back in Skullridge Hollow, the mud-flap house was quiet again. Beltrazila painted pictures of Nandog, smiling and healed, while Zorgabob sat on the porch in the fading light. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something inside him had. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a father, one who had chosen to protect instead of obey, to love instead of follow orders. Nandog lay at his feet, scars visible, but peaceful. He looked up at Zorgabob with those same loyal eyes, and for the first time, the man didn't see a weapon. He saw a soul, a memory that refused to die, a life that had chosen to keep living. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Beltrazila came outside, curling into her father's lap. "Do you think Nandog remembers all of it?" she asked. Zorgabob smiled gently. I think he remembers what matters, he said, and for the first time in years, it was enough.